When I was reading your piece, that part where you described getting lost in that market, it really stuck with me. It's like you're literally surrounded by people, but that feeling of being alone, it's so intense.
Yeah.
And you really captured that, the kind of that overwhelming feeling of unfamiliarity.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because so many people, they have that experience, right? Of feeling lost, even in a crowd. And it makes you think about like what it really means to connect with others, because it's clearly more than just being physically present.
Totally. It's like physically you were there with all those people, but it was that emotional connection that was missing.
Exactly.
And then you have that incredible encounter with a woman who welcomes you into her home, even though you couldn't even speak the same language.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it about that moment that stood out to you?
Well, it really highlights the power of nonverbal communication, wouldn't you say?
Oh, I think
like a smile, a gesture, even just a look, it can really bridge even the biggest cultural gaps.
Oh, sure.
It speaks to that kind of innate human desire to connect on a deeper level.
And what's interesting is you said you don't remember all the specific details of that encounter.
Right.
But you vividly remember the feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's like emotions, they tend to leave a much deeper imprint on our memory than factual details, right? Yeah. And there's actually a lot of research on this about how experiences that evoke really strong emotional responses, they're just more likely to be kind of stored and recalled more vividly.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
So you might not remember what you had for breakfast yesterday, but a powerful emotional experience that stays with you.
That makes sense.
Like that feeling of being welcomed, of finding a moment of home, even in a stranger's kindness. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how we're always so busy, like we're rushing around checking things off our to-do lists.
Right. And
we forget to just like soak in the feeling of an experience.
Exactly. And it ties into what you were talking about in your piece about how solo travel, especially, it pushes us out of our comfort zones, right?
Yeah.
It forces us to be more present, more open to those unexpected encounters.
Because when you're alone, you're stripped of all of those familiar comforts.
You are, yeah.
And routines, and it can be daunting, but also, like you said, incredibly liberating.
It is.
It forces you to really engage with the world in a more authentic way, I think.
Absolutely. Because when you remove those kind of external layers of identity and support, you're left with a more raw, vulnerable version of yourself. And that vulnerability, paradoxically, can be a source of strength.
Okay, I like that.
Because it allows you to connect with others on a deeper, more genuine level, you see.
I do, yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
So you said vulnerability can be a source of strength, but it's also kind of scary, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're opening yourself up, especially to strangers, when you're in a completely new place.
It definitely takes courage, yeah.
It does.
And you're right, there is a risk, right? I mean, with any kind of connection, whether it's with someone you meet traveling or with, your family, your friends, there's always that risk. But I think the thing is, when we try to avoid that vulnerability, when we kind of put up those walls,
right,
we also close ourselves off to the possibility of really connecting with people on a deeper level.
It's like we're protecting ourselves, but then we're also missing out.
Yeah, Exactly.
It makes me think of that Brené Brown quote about how vulnerability isn't about winning or losing, it's about showing up and being seen. And that takes a lot of courage.
It really does, yeah.
To be authentically yourself, especially when you're outside of your comfort zone.
Absolutely, and it's often in those moments, when we step outside of what's familiar, when we embrace the unknown with curiosity and that willingness to connect, that's when we have the most rewarding experiences.
So if home isn't really about a place, but more about a feeling, like we were talking about, does that mean that we can find that feeling anywhere?
Yeah.
Even in our everyday lives, we don't have to travel to the other side of the world.
That's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
It's a feeling we can cultivate within ourselves and in our interactions with the people around us. It's about creating those little pockets of belonging, whether it's through deep conversations with the people you love, or acts of kindness, or even just finding that sense of peace and solace in nature,
Yeah, those moments of shared humanity, I love that.
Yeah.
And in your piece, you mentioned that you don't remember exactly what you said to that woman who welcomed you into her home.
Right.
But you remember the warmth and the laughter.
Oh, it does.
It's funny how that works.
Well, laughter's like music, isn't it? It transcends language, it transcends cultural barriers. It's a universal language of connection and joy.
And those moments of joy, they really stay with us.
They do.
Even when the specifics, we forget them.
Exactly.
It's interesting because we often think of like adventure and travel as these big outward journeys.
Right.
But it sounds like what you're saying is finding that sense of home, finding that belonging. It's actually an inward journey too.
It's both, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's about being open to the world around us, but also being present and attuned to ourselves, to our own needs, our own desires.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between seeking those external adventures and cultivating that inner peace and connection.
Finding that balance, that's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about something else you wrote about staying open to the unexpected. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, it's like when we're so focused on our plans,
Yeah.
on how we think things should be,
Right.
we can miss out on those, those unexpected detours that life throws our way.
Because things don't always go according to plan.
Exactly. And it's often those detours, those unplanned adventures that lead us to the most kind of profound discoveries
That's so true.
about ourselves, about the world, about what really matters.
It's like that saying, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Exactly.
But it takes a certain amount of, surrender, maybe,
Yeah, letting go.
to be truly open to the unexpected.
It does, and that can be scary, right?
Yeah,
But it can also be incredibly liberating.
I bet.
Because when we let go of those expectations, when we just allow ourselves to be surprised by life, that's when we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities.
And sometimes even those like fleeting encounters,
Right.
they can really stay with us.
They do.
Like that encounter you described, even though it was years ago, you still carry that feeling with you.
I do.
That feeling of warmth and welcome, of finding home.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so powerful about your writing. It reminds us that home isn't just a place.
You're right.
It's a feeling that we can access
Exactly.
anytime, anywhere, if we're just open to it.
And I think that's what I really want people to take away from this,
Yeah.
That home isn't limited to a physical place or a certain set of circumstances. It's a state of being.
It's about connection.
It is. It's that sense of belonging and connection that honestly we can access anytime, anywhere, just by opening our hearts and minds to the possibility.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
And for everyone listening, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Where have you found those moments of connection, those unexpected pockets of home?
Yeah, tell us your story.
Because you never know, it might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.
That's right.
So as you're going about your day, be present, be open, and don't be afraid of those unexpected detours.
Absolutely.
You never know where they might lead.